Welcome, fellow Stardust. Are you ready for a scare? I see you've come back for more. If you're new here, buckle up, and thank you all for joining me today. My name is Ray, aka Rainbow Fright, lover of all things dark, creepy, and weird. Today's movie review will be on horror thriller The Devil's Candy.
We've come to the place where we joke about the idea of the devil. But that is Satan's lie to distract us from the reality of who he is.
Thank you to my lovely patron, Mr. Dan, for requesting this little gem. I've been wanting to watch this one ever since I did my review of The Loved Ones last year. Also a request. Writer-director Sean Byrne has put out 2 movies, and so far he is off to a great start. Now, even though The Loved Ones and The Devil's Candy came out 6 years apart, and we've not yet seen a third film from him, I'm eager to see what he does next. The Devil's Candy stars Pruitt Taylor Vince, Sherry Appleby, Kiara Glasgow, and Ethan Embry, who does really well in these unhinged roles. Ethan had actually just come off the set of Cheap Thrills when the producers of that movie suggested to Sean that he be considered for the role of Jesse. Cheap Thrills is another movie I reviewed last year, also a request, and it is quite the thrill ride. I also highly recommend that movie. Now, here is a summary of The Devil's Candy, so spoilers are ahead. This story follows a family who is tight-knit, grungy, and metal-loving: Astrid, Zoe, and struggling artist Jesse. They move into their new home, which used to belong to Ray, before he killed his mother because the voice inside of his head told him to. Now staying at a hotel, he continues to hear the voice and tries to return to his old home, but is rejected by Jesse, to the dismay of Astrid and Zoe, who feel he was too harsh on the childlike man. We then witness Ray begin his killing spree of young children, who Jesse inexplicably is compelled to paint, including his own daughter. The images are dark and invoke death. Ray eventually returns again to his old home to claim his next victim, Zoe, but the grit, love, and determination within the Hellman family keep them alive and together. Jesse finally ends the saga by bludgeoning Ray to death with his very own flying V guitar, much like Ray did to his mother at the very start of the film. This movie can really be categorized in a few different ways. Is it a haunted house movie? Is it a religious horror? Or is it just about mental health? Or is it all of these things? Depending on what lens you're watching this movie through, you either see Ray as someone who is possessed by Satan, carrying out all of his duties assigned to him, murdering and dismembering children, or you see him as possessed by the house, just as Jesse becomes possessed, but with Jesse, he becomes good, and Ray instead becomes evil. Or you see this as just an analogy or warning about taking care of one's mental health. And if Ray isn't possessed, he is definitely a candidate for medication and close observation. It's fun to think of this movie being all of those things, because even though its runtime is only 79 minutes, we get a lot out of it. It's not too short, and it ends right where it should. I love the nugget of inspiration that this movie comes from, which is that the image of the devil is a false one, a lie to mortals to distract him from the fact that Satan can in fact walk on the earth, and does so by inhabiting the bodies of humans, using them to carry out his evil deeds. From here, we get a battle between good and evil, and perhaps the house is haunted. And while both Jesse and Ray were summoned by the house's evil desires, Jesse was able to overcome that temptation, unlike Ray, who killed his mother and several children. Despite producing potentially career-changing artwork, Jesse sensed that there was something greater and darker at play. He also wasn't willing to sacrifice the relationship with his family for the limelight, even though he wanted it so badly. Leonard, the man who was interested in representing Jesse, named his studio Bilal, which in Hebrew means worthless. Lois, and it is also a character from John Milton's poem Lost Paradise, who was a fallen angel created after Lucifer and was one of the kings of hell. He also liked to beckon others to sacrifice. Leonard attempts to persuade Jesse to sacrifice his family, just a little, in order to boost his career by saying nothing of true worth comes without some sacrifice. But Jesse's gut tells him that something isn't quite right. Jesse looking like the most familiar representation of Jesus, and Ray wearing a red jumpsuit almost the entire movie is quite fitting. And Ray's childlike innocent nature is represented by the white stripes down the sides. The stylization and imagery in this movie is slick yet gritty. The blood and paint on the screen almost becomes one and are interchangeable at times. Jesse becomes more and more covered in paint as the movie progresses, adding to this sacrificial Jesus image if in your eyes the paint represents blood. The red motif throughout the film gives the movie a hopeless and dreadful feeling as we helplessly watch Ray commit his senseless acts of violence. The editing and transitions created a sense of worry and urgency for the audience, which worked to the film's advantage since there's a race against the clock. It was only a matter of time before Zoe became Ray's latest victim. She lived in his old house, she had a flying V tattooed on her arm, and she was nice to him. There was no way she wasn't getting kidnapped by him. The Devil's Candy is a really well-made independent horror film that should have gotten a wider release, but I'm glad I finally found it thanks to Mr. Dan. It actually gets me thinking about a newer horror film about a witchy rock and roll mother and daughter who live in the woods. Another movie worth checking out that also has a lot of heart and was written, directed, produced, and starred a family of 4. I also want to mention the amazing artwork in the film that was done by Church of Satan member Stephen Kastner. Sean wanted to create something that was really authentic, and he certainly did that. My biggest negative would be the fire at the end. I mean, come on. Was that intentionally bad CGI or what? Obviously, nobody would have been able to last in the fire for that long, but the use of the fire and its symbolism wrapped everything up in a nice little bow. The Devil's Candy earns 3.5 rainbow skulls out of 5. You can find this one on Tubi, Vudu, and IFC Midnight, which you can find on Amazon. Well, thank you again for joining me today, fellow Stardust. I appreciate you being here with me. I'll be back with more videos. So, if you haven't already, go ahead and hop on the Rainbow Fright freight train and hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell. That way you'll get notified every time I upload a new video. I hope I see you next time. Peace.